Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. My name is Judy Moore. I'm a Senior Policy Fellow at the Center for Global Development. Thank you for joining us today for this conversation that is both relevant and necessary. Critical minerals in Africa, avoiding a zero-sum game. Welcome to the Center for Global Development virtually. We are a DC and London-based think tank that for the last 2 decades has provided rigorous research and evidence-based policymaking recommendations. And over those 2 decades, we've always partnered with like-minded institutions to expand the scope of this really important work that we're doing. And today, in that light, we're jointly hosting this event with the OECD Development Centre and the African Development Bank. Raga, the director of the OECD Development Centre, will get an opportunity to talk to us about the incredible work they do, and she'll be moderating the high-level panel that will follow the IEA scene setting. But before I turn over to Mr. Satomori, I wanted to make a few points. In its most recent report, Economic Development in Africa, UNCTAD calls Africa the least diversified region in the world with regard to exports, that 45 of the 54 countries depend on commodities for 60% of the merchandise exports. Without integrating Africa into critical minerals value chain, the continent stands to lose another opportunity. There is a report from CSIS that says that despite Africa's dominant position in terms of critical minerals, Africa is still on the sidelines and marginal when it comes to deals and negotiations around critical minerals. That exploration budget in Africa is the second lowest in the world. So at the just ended Energy Summit in Nairobi, the Kenyan president encouraged participants to focus on the opportunities, and I hope today our conversation will focus on that. COVID-19 and the war in Ukraine has shown us how exposed global value chains are when it comes to being disrupted at key choke points. And I think that provides Africa an opportunity to be an alternative. Today, we hear from African ministers, Honorable Paul Kabuzwe, the Minister of Mines and Minerals in Development in Zambia, as well as from Her Excellency Antoinette Kalambayi, the Minister of Mines, Democratic Republic of Congo, and Honorable Cornelia Shilonga, Deputy Minister of Energy and Mines from Namibia. And it's important to note that these two were the first women to cover these roles in their countries. We hear perspectives from Fred Kabanda, the Division Manager for Extractives, African Natural Resource Management Investment Center, the African Development Bank, Mr. Silas Olang, Africa Energy Transition Advisor, Natural Resource Governance Institute, and Mr. Richard Morgan, Head of Government Relations, Anglo-American. The panelists will provide insights on how the transition to net zero and extraction of critical minerals can be an opportunity for Africa. So without much ado, I will turn now over to Mr. Keisuke Satomori, Director, Energy Markets and Security, International Energy Agency, to set the scene. Mr. Satomori, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, good day. I'm pleased to join you today to introduce some of the IEA's recent work on critical minerals and to hear from today's speakers about the implications for Africa. Casey, can you show the slides?
I believe they should be on the screen now.
It's on the screen? I'm sorry, I cannot see. Yeah. Okay, looks good. So thank you. So already today, the shift to a more electrified and renewable rich energy systems is turbocharging demand for a range of critical minerals and metals. Demand for the main battery metals has risen sharply. In the last 5 years, lithium demand tripled, and the cobalt demand grew by 70%, and nickel by 40%. And this contrasts with the relatively modest growth of bulk materials like zinc and lead. Metals with higher share of clean tech in total demand exhibited higher growth, with lithium being a prime example. And driven by rising demand and high prices, the market size of key energy transition minerals has doubled over the last 5 years, reaching $320 billion in 2022, last year. Next, please. So this is only the beginning of the growth story. From EVs to solar panels to wind turbines, the deployment of clean energy technologies is moving fast, and we expect this trend to continue. And this is what would be required in net zero by 2050 scenario. So mineral demand for clean energy applications would grow by 3.5 times already to 2030. And the clean energy is the main source of demand growth, so that by 2030, it accounts for 90% of lithium demand, nearly 60% for nickel and cobalt, and 45% for copper. This brings huge opportunities, but also raises questions about whether future supplies can expand fast enough to keep up. And failure to do so would slow down clean energy transitions or make it more costly. The good news is that the supply chain may have started to catch up. A host of new projects were announced in the past year or two. If all these projects are implemented as planned and on time, then supply in 2030 for some minerals would get closer to meeting countries' clean energy ambitions. And of course, this is a big if, and the adequacy of future supply is far from assured. And there are ever-present risk of delays, permitting issues, and the cost overruns. Net zero emission scenario would require even more projects to come through, backed by actions on the demand side. And I would like to finish with a slide from our Africa Energy Outlook released last year. So the coming demand growth represents an enormous opportunity for African countries. And Africa accounts for over 40% of global reserves of cobalt, manganese, and platinum, key minerals for batteries for hydrogen technologies. Revenue from copper and the key battery metals production in Africa are estimated around $20 billion today, and that's 13% of the global market. With rising demand, African revenues from their sales could more than double by 2030 if they maintain their market share today. However, expanding production to capitalize on this opportunity requires robust governance, investments in infrastructure, and a strong focus on minimizing the environmental and the social impacts of mining operations. With many countries adopting new regulations and policies aimed at improving the ESG impacts of mining, such as the EU batteries regulations, it will be increasingly important for countries to focus on these issues to maintain market access. So the IEA is committed to ensuring reliable, secure, and sustainably produced mineral supply for clean energy transitions, and to work with partners to ensure that all countries reap the potential benefits of mineral wealth. And that's why next week, we are bringing together ministers and other high-level officials from 45 countries, along with a representative from industry and the civil society for the first ever Critical Minerals and the Clean Energy Summit. The summit will aim to build a broader consensus on effective actions to diversify mineral supply chains, enhance market transparency, accelerate technological innovation and recycling, and promote sustainable and responsible development practices. So I will stop here, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Satamori. This was very, very interesting and good to have the setting the scene from from our good colleagues at the IEA, and I wish you well for the conference next week. Very interesting. And a warm welcome to all of our speakers in the important panel that we are just about to start. My name is Raga. I am the director of the OECD Development Centre, and I am greatly honored to have this role as moderator of this distinguished panel. We have 3 African ministers, as was said here before. Her Excellency Antoinette Nsamba Kalambayi, I hope I pronounced that correctly. She is the Minister of Mines of the DRC. His Excellency Honorable Paul Kabuswe, the Minister of Mines and Minerals Development from Zambia, and Honorable Cornelia Shilunga, Deputy Minister of Energy and Mines from Namibia. And in addition, we have 3 other distinguished panelists. Mr. Fred Kabanza, Division Manager of Extractives, African Natural Resources Management and Investment Center, ANRC, that's a long title, in the Africa Development Bank, AFDB. We also have Richard Morgan, the Head of Government Relations, Anglo-American. And finally, Silas Olang, the Africa Energy Transition Advisor, Natural Resource Governance Institute, NRGI. So we have tremendous capacity on this panel, and we have just heard from the IEA how the clean energy transition will drive massive growth in demand for critical minerals, and yet meeting this demand will require a huge scale up in mining investment. $1.7 trillion over the next 20 years, according to UNCTAD. And we also need to avoid the disruptions that we have seen in recent times. This means that we need a diversification of supply chains. Several countries have taken measures to diversify and increase the resilience in supply chains, global critical minerals. And this includes the Inflation Reduction Act in the United States and the EU's Critical Minerals Act. Now is the time for African economy to take advantage of this restructuring in global minerals trade. And this is sort of the introduction into the discussion, and it's time to turn to our esteemed panelists. I just want to warn you that I have the role of being the fierce timekeeper, and I would kindly ask you to stick to the allotted time of 3 minutes per question, because we have a lot of material to go through, and that's why I will start now with questions with the same question to the honorable ministers, starting with Honorable Shilonga. And just to set the scene from your respective countries, what mineral resources are available in your countries, and how do you hope to use them? And again, the highlights in 3 minutes, please. Your Excellency, Honorable Shilonga.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I would like to recognize all the excellencies and the honorable members and the honorable ministers that are forming part of this panel, respective and dignitaries to this meeting. First, I would like to register our appreciation for the invitation to this high-level virtual event on critical minerals in Africa. It's organized by Africa Development Bank, the Center for Global Development, and the OECD. The Namibian economy relies heavily on the mining industry, and mining accounts approximately for 11% of the GDP and providing more than 50% of foreign exchange earnings. My apologies. My apologies for that. We are the world-class producer of rough diamonds, uranium, gold, zinc, acid-grade fluorspar, copper, lead, limestone, cement, salt, and dimension stones. We are also prospective of lithium, graphite, cobalt, and rare earth, and other minerals that are now declared critical by many countries globally. Due to this global demand for energy transition, Namibia has then been experiencing a significant investment interest by developed countries, international exploration and mining companies in the area of critical raw metals and minerals. What we hope to use them is that Namibia sees this interest in its critical minerals as an opportunity to leverage on the current situation to derive better value from our mineral resources for the benefit of our country, Namibia. And just as any other country endowed with mineral resources, our goal is to add value to our minerals for viable projects and improving the socio-economic status of the people of Namibia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. And moving now to Your Excellency Antoinette and Sampa Kalambai. The floor is yours.
Je vous remercie pour la parole. Je commencerai par saluer tous les participants à ce panel de haut niveau. Comme vous le savez, la République démocratique du Congo, avec ses 2 345 000 km² dispose d'une variété de ressources minérales précieuses telles que l'or et le diamant, les métaux de base comme le cuivre, le cobalt, le zinc, le tin, et les métaux ferreux et d'alliage tels que le fer, le manganèse, l'aluminium et d'autres germanium, coltan, lithium, et pour ne citer que ceux-là. Le cuivre, le cobalt, le zinc, l'or, le diamant, la cassitérite et le coltan sont actuellement en exploitation. Les autres en phase de recherche, donc je citerai le lithium et le fer, ainsi que le nickel. Et en phase de redémarrage, nous avons démocratique du Congo ont atteint une phase d'élaboration poussée avec la disparition des produits miniers bruts et celle progressive de concentrés. Dans la vision du développement des chaînes de valeur, des différentes filières de produits manufacturés semi-finis et finis. Comme je l'ai dit tout à l'heure, nous voudrons aujourd'hui profiter de tous les avantages de nos ressources minérales. Nous voudrons développer la chaîne des valeurs, donner de la valeur ajoutée à nos minéraux afin que nous puissions contrôler dès l'exploration, l'exploitation, le traitement et la transformation localement jusqu'à l'exportation. Voilà un peu de mots, la réponse que j'ai pour votre question. J'ai dit.
Merci beaucoup, Your Excellency. I just wanted to mention that we are providing translation from both English and French translation, and you can find that on the Zoom. Thank you very much. Now moving to Zambia. Unfortunately, His Excellency Minister, Honorable Minister Paul Kapuswe had an unexpected engagement. So he is here well represented by his permanent secretary from the Ministry of Mines and Mineral Development, Dr. Hapenka Kapeta. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much to the organizers. I wish to ride on the protocols that have been raised by honorable ministers before me. I wish to indicate that Zambia is a mining country. In terms of base metals, Zambia produces copper. We are talking about cobalt, lead, tin, tantalum, manganese, nickel, lithium is coming on board. We are talking about zinc, iron, and many more. Under precious minerals category, we have gold and silver being produced in the country. When we talk about gemstones, we have emeralds, aquamarine, we have berry, we have garnet, we have tourmaline, we have sugilite, we have amethyst, and we have quartz, among others. In terms of industrial minerals, we produce sand, there is clay, there is silica, gypsum, marble, that's limestone, graphite, tile, and phosphate. I also need to indicate that right now we are exploring on rare earth elements across the country. I need to indicate that the mining industry is one of the the biggest contributor to our tax revenue at 43% in the country at the moment. GDP, we are talking about 17% of GDP is coming from the mining industry. In terms of employment, the mining industry contributes 8%. And we talk about forex earnings from the mining industry. We are getting about 70% coming from the mining industry. I wish to indicate that in the recent past, about 3 weeks ago, government declared the critical minerals strategy. And in that strategy, we have identified key critical minerals as essential to Zambia's development, and therefore they are strategic. And the interpretation of that is that the government has realized that the development model that has been used all along has not worked. The people of this country and many African countries tend to be poor despite the endowment of minerals that you find in their territories. And therefore, we are learning and taking the lead from Botswana. Therefore, every critical mineral that is produced in Zambia will be subject to value addition within the country, and what will be exported is only where value has been added. In addition to that, the model of getting dividends for the country has not worked because of matters of transfer pricing by multinationals, and therefore our model is that we are going to get the value of minerals from production, and we shall find the markets for our value for various minerals. Right now, there is a heightened impetus in exploration of minerals in the country, led, of course, by the Ministry of Mines and Mineral Development and various international private players in the exploration field. So really, this is one of the key areas, and we believe that in the next 1 year or so, we may be able to open one of the largest lithium mines in the southern part of Zambia. I believe that this, for the mining industry in Zambia and possibly in Africa, this is the right time. The idea of exporting raw materials out of the African continent is history. We need to start adding value within Africa and possibly trade among African countries. I submit.
Thank you very much. This has been a testament to the premise of or the reason for why we are here today. From the interventions from all three ministers, we see that Africa is a hugely important source of critical minerals, and this has been a very good setting the scene. Now, turning to the private sector, to get the private sector perspective, I want to turn to Richard Morgan from Anglo American. The mining sector is becoming increasingly digitized and automated. And what, from your perspective, what are the implications for African economies where the mining sector is generally viewed as a major provider of jobs? Are there any existing policies fit for purpose on that? And again, I will do this regularly, remind you of the time, all of you. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Direct answer to the question is that, and excuse me for any noise, I'm in New York for the UN General Assembly meetings, or at least in the margins, where I've been listening to similar points from representatives of African governments. So the main starting point is that we hear you. We hear that one of the sessions I went to was Africa in the driving seat. So there is a sense that this is a chance for Africa and African governments to be in the driving seat. Absolutely get that. We get that the other stakeholders are going to be either the consumers on the BRICS side, if you like, or on the Western side, and that the articulation of what the offer is from the West is something that's definitely coming on a bit now in terms of how do we do the sustainable development angle, how do we do the securing of infrastructure to go with it. Because if we're going to process, hearing the Zambian Permsec's point on beneficiation, very much agreed that if we're going to do more processing, for example, in country, then that's going to need other bits of infrastructure, such as more electric power, for example. And that's really, I think, our job is to say, right, we hear you, we hear all the various stakeholders here. And one of the things we've committed to is to create 5 jobs off the mine for every job on the mine, recognizing the sort of increase in technology, meaning that there's less direct employment. And that's another aspect to something we're pursuing called the collaborative regional development, work with partners to say, rather than people flooding to where a mine site is, expecting work that may not exist, stay where you are and we'll try and bring development to you. So I think we need a new approach to creating economic benefit and environmental sustainability in a way that perhaps hasn't happened in the past. And I think, therefore, we need a new sort of social compact to make it work. So I think that's the main point I'd make, is that we're listening. It is possible, but that actually globalization 1.0 was a different model, because copper, for example, was commoditized. We're going to have to start putting things like responsibility into the value brand of what copper is. So that's a challenge for us all going forward, I think. In the same way we do for diamonds. We have a big diamond business across Southern Africa, through De Beers, in Namibia, in Botswana, and putting that value on the diamond product is something that we're accustomed to as a business. It's just now got to happen for the other things like lithium and copper and nickel and cobalt.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Richard. And a little, if I can follow up a little bit, because mining companies are under more scrutiny than ever. And you know, both from the environmental and social impact perspective, but also concerning greenhouse gas emissions from mineral extraction and the use of water. Can you, given all of this, can you tell us a little bit more? How can modern mining be a catalyst for sustainable development? Is that possible?
I think it is possible. You can construct closed water systems, or indeed negotiate a better water deal than currently exists. We've just on to the IEA point about shortage of copper. It's true. I mean, we just opened a huge copper mine in Peru, 300,000 or 400,000. I know this is in Africa, but it's the same principle. 300,000 or 400,000 tons of copper a year, and water, of course, in the Andes is a very key question. And so, by negotiating with the communities for years, 5-10 years of negotiations to ensure how you get the water to the right people in the right way. So it is possible. And that's my other main point really to this audience, is that these things take time. We've taken an exploration site in Zambia now, pleased to say. We've talked to the local chiefs about how things will run in terms of social expectations, agreed with them what we will do and what we won't do. It's the same process. You just have to go through it properly and check that everybody is on board, and that you defining the terms more widely in terms of the SDGs. So in terms of water, environment, and the general sustainable development that should outlast the mine. So these are all ways of looking at things that require us to be more of a development partner than just a mining company. You have to be the mining company as well. So when you're having your people in the driver's seat, you need to have your various passengers. And I think the sort of the technical side of what it takes to build a mine, how long it takes, and how much it costs, those are all things we have to bear in mind. So we can't just wish it into practice overnight, say, oh, well, we'd like more copper. As the Zambian government knows, they want to double copper production. We'd be happy to help with that. But sadly, these things just don't happen like that. It does take time and a lot of consultation.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And greetings to New York. I arrived in Paris this morning from New York. So
okay. No, well, yes, you'll recognize the skyline. But
exactly.
Yeah, but these discussions are going on a lot here as to, well, how do we organize the consensus around critical minerals? And I think it's a good discussion to be having.
It is. And I was witness to some of it as well. But thank you. As we've heard from our ministers here, to capitalize on the economic opportunity of mining growth, the countries need to go beyond simply exporting raw materials. We heard that message loud and clear. And as we heard also, across Africa, several economies have introduced export controls to encourage in-country processing and to add greater value. So I want to turn again to the ministers and now to Minister Shilunka. Namibia has recently introduced a ban on exports of raw lithium and other transition minerals. And if you could please, I would be grateful if you could outline how your government arrived at this policy decision and what you hope to achieve. And you have the floor, Minister.
Thank you very much for the question. It should be noted that lithium is one of the critical raw material as classified, and its importance in development of clean energy is just as significant. In the past few years, the security of critical mineral supply chains has become a global strategic issue. Namibia, looking at this, we see the interest in the critical minerals as an opportunity to leverage on the current situation to derive better value and to the benefit of the country. Just as any other country endowed with mineral resources, our goal is to add value to our minerals for viable projects. I have alluded to that earlier. And the fact that we have realized now that mineral rights holders that are mining lithium and other critical minerals, they are exporting large volumes of unprocessed ore. And now that they are not processed locally, it has left a room for other unspecified minerals that might be contained in that unprocessed ore to leave the country at the same time. And that we have realized that is exposing us as a country to potential lose out on the royalties revenue from the unspecified minerals that are contained in that unprocessed ore. That has then generated a decision that we have taken as Namibia to ban the export of unprocessed minerals, mostly lithium, which is deemed very critical. And currently, we are discussing the modality on how to develop that industry And the ultimate result or the goal is for us one day to derive and extend possible finished consumable products that are manufactured here in Namibia. What is it that we want to achieve as a country by doing that? We want local value addition and beneficiation to be derived from our critical minerals. And we also take note that local processing will create employment, it will create an opportunity for skill transfer and technology transfer as well, and many other returns. And that will add more to socioeconomic benefit of our country, and also more value to our treasury. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I wanna go back to Minister Kalambai and the Permanent Secretary to dig a little deeper into the challenges that many countries face with in-country value addition, which is a very important point. Unreliable access to power or high transport costs can undermine the business case when the global competition is stiff. And to increase these incentives, the DRC and Zambia are creating a special economic zone to develop the manufacturing capacity for the battery precursor materials. And this is, of course, intended to help both countries climb up the ladder in electric vehicle and battery global value chains, with financing from the United States for infrastructure development, for example. Your Excellencies, could you please elaborate a little bit on this collaboration between the DRC and Zambia and how it can make a difference? And I ask you, and Minister Kalambai, I will start with you. If you can answer in 3 minutes or less, I would be very grateful. Thank you.
Je suis ravi déjà de vous entendre énumérer les différents auxquels nos deux pays, donc ici la Zambie et la République démocratique du Congo, font face. Cela nous donne des défis conjoncturels qui seront dans les jours à venir résolus. À titre d'information, la République démocratique du Congo et la Zambie se partagent les frontières subsahariennes avec des occurrences uniques de cobalt, dont l'essentiel se trouve en République démocratique du Congo. C'est aussi plus d'un siècle d'exploitation minière et d'une maîtrise certaine des procédés d'extraction minérale qui a fait école. Sur base de ces dénominateurs communs, les deux pays ont signé un accord bilatéral L'idée est donc essentiellement de mutualiser nos ressources, nos capacités, nos efforts en vue de l'atteinte de l'objectif commun, celui d'être en capacité de créer de la valeur là où même sont extraites les substances minérales par l'élaboration des produits manufacturés semi-finis tels que les précurseurs de batteries et les produits finis comme les batteries de téléphones, d'ordinateurs portables et pour la motorisation des véhicules électriques. Nous avions mis, nous, du côté République démocratique du Congo, une zone économique spéciale a été créée avec ces conditions incitatives, notamment en matière de fiscalité et de mise à disposition d'infrastructures économiques de base et un couloir d'exportation facilité par les échanges transfrontaliers, étant assise non loin d'une ressource minérale abondante couplée à l'existence d'un centre d'excellence pour la recherche et développement sur la batterie, feront cette différence tant souhaitée par les deux pays et de manière générale l'ensemble du continent africain. Outre la possibilité sur le marché africain des batteries pour téléphones cellulaires, laptops, véhicules électriques, des avantages induits tels que la création d'emplois locaux, l'impulsion et la diversité économique sont escomptés. Sans oublier l'amélioration de la qualité de vie de nos deux pays et pourquoi pas de toute l'Afrique. Voilà un peu de la réponse à votre deuxième préoccupation.
Thank you very much. And that is the purpose of all of this, to improve the lives of of your citizens and of to make sure that the benefits go to the people of Africa. Permanent Secretary Kabeta, do you have anything to add from the Zambian side quickly?
Yes, I have something to add. I was lost in translations, so in case there is any repetitions of what I'm going to say from what has already been said, I apologize in advance. But I wish to indicate from the outset that Congo DR and Zambia are well endowed and produce the highest grade of copper and cobalt in the world. Between the two countries, we are talking about almost 70% of cobalt is being produced in this region. And cobalt is a key mineral in energy transition. In addition to that, I think you talk about copper, another critical mineral that is required. Congo DR is number 3 in the is number 2 or number 3 in the world, and Zambia is very close to that. So our copper production has slumped in the recent past, but we are still very high. It is important, therefore, that the two countries, Congo DR and Zambia, have great advantages and there is complementarity in this relationship. For instance, the mineral commodities will facilitate for the manufacture of battery precursors. It is critical that the two countries must be the hub for that purpose. The production of electric cars in Zambia and in Congo will critically add to the energy transition. Where Zambia is lacking in some cases in terms of the quantity of copper that may be produced, Congo DR will fill up the gap because I think they have opened some of the largest mines in the recent past. In terms of value addition, we believe that the cooperation will facilitate in-country value addition within the continent and promote both regional and international value chains. This will also allow to create jobs for our people. Right now, we have an army of young people without hope of what may happen. These government interventions are like to create employment for young people, and it will increase revenue, which will drive the transformation agenda. In the case of Zambia, we have the 8th National Development Plan that focuses on economic transformation and job creation, which is very critical. There will also be easy access. With this collaboration, there will be easy access of the two countries to the Africa intercontinental trade area, free trade area, because for a very long time, Africa has always been looking outside the continent for trade. Through this free trade area, we believe that a lot of what will be produced in the country in terms of electric batteries, electric motor vehicles, Africa is a market. And Africa is the future of the world. That's how we see it. We see this collaboration to bring in aspects of capacity building, and there will be knowledge exchange, expertise between the two countries, and between the two countries, we can face the world with courage and confidence. We believe our strategy of creating and collaborating between the two countries is the way to go. For a long time, there is always the view that for Africa to collaborate, of course, there is the US that is involved in this collaboration. We need to start creating partnerships between the two countries as we go forward. I submit.
Thank you very much, Mr. Capetta. This is very interesting, and it's very interesting to hear about the collaboration between Zambia and the DRC, and also about the benefits, potential benefits of intra-regional trade, and to look at the African market itself. I think you made very, very interesting points. And let me now turn to Namibia again. As part of the Global Gateway Strategy, Namibia has established a strategic partnership with the EU to develop sustainable raw materials value chains. Excuse me. My apologies. Sustainable raw materials value chains and renewable hydrogen. I understand that the aim is to link minerals extraction with finance for a range of sustainable development objectives and ESG standards. Can you tell us a little bit more about this partnership, and would you describe it as a partnership between equals? If I can ask you to answer this little question in 3 minutes, that would be fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. Yes, it is true. We have established that partnership with the EU, and we believe that the MOU will be beneficial for Namibia because the partnership is aiming to support, and I would like to go through the aims of the partnership. We are looking at Namibia to have its resource increasingly deployed to underpin a sustainable and inclusive economic growth, the creation of local added value and domestic revenue mobilization. Secondly, Namibia is also to develop an internationally competitive and sustainable industry in which beneficiated and value-added minerals, both primary and secondary raw materials, become feedstock in the field of manufacturing, semi-finished and consumer end products, both for home and also for the export markets. Thirdly, the development of open, fair, and competitive market for renewable hydrogen, critical raw and processed materials. This will allow the EU to diversify its suppliers for materials necessary to achieve the green and digital transition and its open strategic autonomy. The fourth one is for us, for our Namibian companies and the EU companies, and Namibia as a country and the EU member states to apply corporate sustainability principles in our own operations and activities to ensure mechanisms that are supporting the adoption of such in fostering inclusive and sustainable value chains. Then we are also looking at integration where feasible of Namibian and EU existing and emerging industrial value chains linked with raw materials and renewable hydrogen. Then Namibia have already launched a mineral beneficiation strategy in the year 2021. And we have developed such a strategy in order for us to attain the objectives of local value addition and manufacturing that is happening in Namibia. Of course, yes, and finally, I would like to say what we are looking for in this partnership. We seek to benefit from the agreement, and it's a partnership of equals. Nobody must lose, and nobody must be the one winner only. So we are looking at a win-win situation whereby the benefits that we are deriving from this memorandum of understanding will be equal for both of us in Namibia and also the EU member states. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. This is important cooperation that you were describing. I now want to turn to Fred Kabanda from the Africa Development Bank, and thank you, Fred, for waiting patiently for your turn. One of the primary obstacles that African economies are facing in attracting new investment is a need for more geoscience data to really understand Africa's reserves profile. Can you tell us from your side what steps are being taken to gather this data, and how can the aforementioned African Continental Free Trade Area be leveraged to achieve the transformational change at scale that is so much needed? You have the floor, Mr. Kabanda.
Thank you very much, and I would like to thank you, our partners, OECD, for organizing this event and inviting us to be part of this important discussion. So the two questions you have asked, I'll split them into two different responses. One on the geoscience, and then two on the benefits of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Now, starting with the data, geoscience data is indeed expensive. However, it is required in order to have sustainable mining globally. It is therefore competitive to get this investment, especially it's getting stiffer with the green minerals. And I will use green minerals to equate this to what others will call strategic, others will call critical or core minerals. And in my discussion, I'll just be referring these to as green minerals. This is key because many countries would like to take a share of this boom. And what Africa is doing, therefore, is to get innovative in attracting this investment. Starting from what we know, the ministers have very ably explained the resources in their different countries. I would only like to add that the numbers in some of the minerals are exceptionally high. If you look at platinum, for instance, 91% of all the global reserves are in Africa. 79% of the phosphates are in Africa. Cobalt reserves, 53%. And manganese, bauxite, graphite will all continue to indicate this trend. Secondly, it is important to look at the battery chemistries that are being looked at today. And whether you're looking at lithium cobalt batteries or nickel manganese cobalt batteries or LFP batteries, sodium batteries, the resources are all spread in Africa. It is also good to note that the resources are not only spread in one area, but are in South, East, Central, West, and North Africa. What this means is that the geology is conducive. And because it is conducive, it reduces the risk in terms of exploration. And since we know that indeed the geology does not know our geographic boundaries, it is only prudent that when we explore, it is intended and it is expected that discoveries will happen. Now, one thing that African countries are also looking at is the global trend in exploration. Already the IEA indicated the amount of low exploration capital coming into Africa. I would just like to add that with these green minerals, we have seen that exploration budgets are indeed increasing. We see that in 2021 alone, there was an increase in exploration of 25% for lithium and 27% for cobalt. This is fundamental. A second point to note is that whereas the green minerals were a scope that was only historically dominated by the junior miners, the majors are also getting interest. And we saw that in 2020, there was an increase of 34% of the majors coming into this sector. So therefore, it is what, looking at these points, this is what the African governments are doing. We see that one, they are getting involved themselves in the acquisition of the data. Two, they are improving investment environment. And three, they are creating certainty in their policy environments. In the acquisition itself, we see that many countries are now sponsoring their geoscience institutions and sometimes even creating mining companies to get involved directly. Some of this money is coming from the royalties and taxes that are being paid in mines that are existing and being reinvested into exploration. We also see that governments are investing directly themselves. Two examples here. One, in Ghana, we see that the Ghana Minerals Income Investment Fund is funding with $33 million a lithium project in Ghana, co-financing. Similarly, in Angola, we also see that their sovereign wealth fund is contributing $50 million to a rare earth elements project with a company called Pensana. So these, the governments are involved. Infrastructure is another contribution that these countries are looking at, because it is important that governments provide power, water, transport infrastructure to facilitate exploration of minerals, which will lead into extraction, processing, and movement into the next phase of the value chains. In the African Development Bank, we saw a gap in funding in the year 2019 at our Africa Economic Outlook. The infrastructure gap was between 68 and 108 billion US dollars. This, we have an opportunity to be able to fill with climate finance as one of the things that can be looked at. We also see finally on the aspects of the incentives that are being given, that many governments are actually exempting VAT on exploration activities, which is a good trend. Finally, let me just respond very briefly using an example on the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Just one example.
Very briefly, thank you.
Yes, just one example and I'll be done. Africa has 1.4 billion people. GDP, 3 trillion. Export, raw materials mainly. 600 million people have no access to electricity. The green minerals are an opportunity to catalyze the regional integration. And the example I would like to give is this study that we did together with our partners. We hired a Bloomberg to do a study for us in 2021 on the cost of producing battery precursors in DR Congo. We chose DR Congo because it had enormous cobalt and lithium endowments. The uniqueness with this study was that, yes, it came out with 3 times being cheaper to produce battery precursors in DR Congo as compared to the US, EU, and China. It was, however, even when we chose DR Congo, which has endowments of resources, DR Congo required 5 other countries, Zambia, Tanzania, Gabon, South Africa, and manganese to contribute to this battery precursor. It is therefore only prudent that the Africa Continental Free Trade Area is something that can be able to develop and help us enhance mineral development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kapanta. And I'm sorry for pressing you for time, because these are very important examples and good discussion. And you and the minister have made a powerful case for accelerating both investment and the emphasis on regional cooperation in Africa in the mineral sector. And clearly the time is now. And of course, a new scramble for Africa's mineral resources will also bring risk from a macroeconomic, social, and environmental and governance perspective. And here the Development Center, working with African mineral producers to confront these challenges, is a core part of our work on natural resource-based development here at the center. And in the past decade, we have produced guidance on revenue management and spending, shared value creation, contract negotiations, domestic resource mobilization, and on managing corruption. And more recently, we have looked at how mineral-rich and fossil fuel producing countries can make the most of the global green transition. And with that introduction, I want to turn to Mr. Silas Olang from the Natural Resources Governance Institute. And Mr. Olang, also my apologies for keeping you waiting. I'm sure you have wanted to jump in, but if we go to the governance, mining's track record in Africa is not entirely positive. There has been a problem with corruption. In a lot of cases, mining has had a negative impact on local communities and left somewhat of a legacy of environmental damage. And how can African economies, because you hear from the ministers and every speaker, that's the intention. How can African economies do things differently this time around in order to not fall in the same situation as before? Mr. Silas, the floor is yours. No more than 5 minutes, I would.
Thank you very much. It's a great question, and indeed, the mining history in Africa is not a pleasant one. So I think we need to address the root causes of this, inglorious history of mining in Africa. And basically, we should think about poor governance and corruption as a major, challenges. And because corruption itself undermines the key safeguards that protect local communities and environment. Redirect public finance into private hands, but also disrupt and delay production just when the responsible produced minerals are urgently needed to meet the climate goals. So NRGI research has found out that jurisdictions with good governance actually have shorter mining lead times and are better able to bring in investments. So it is not only African economies, but also multinational investors and other global actors must ensure that there are benefits for citizens of African mineral producing countries, that the environment and communities are protected. And only then we can responsibly deliver the supply of transition minerals needed to avert climate collapse. But to achieve this triple win and beyond win-win, things have to be done differently from the past history. If we fail one of them, then we fail all of them. Now, what needs to be done? First is really to ensure there is a strong and stable legal framework governing the sector. It begins with the licensing, which is one of the highest risk stage of the extractive supply chain when it comes to corruption. As one of the first stage of the supply chain, it is really set the tone for all that follows. So it is important to address the corruption at the licensing stage. Secondly, having laws on the books is only the first step. There must be support for the mechanisms and actors essential to enforcement and accountability. Governments have either under-resourced efforts to hold companies to account or even actively blocked crucial accountability actors. Enforcement agencies are also financially outgunned by those they seek to prosecute, or their independence is compromised in one way or another. Third, transparency is key. Making the information available that is needed to detect corruption and to enable informed dialogue about transition mineral projects and their impacts. That includes project level contract transparency, payments, commodity trading, and beneficial ownership. Fourth, need to build from voluntary standards to mandatory legal frameworks that uphold transparency and integrity. And even these are no replacement of strong mandatory legal framework from governments. The proliferation of standards is a challenge, and it would benefit from consolidation. But any unifying effort must be done in a way that raises bar rather than lowering common denominator. And any efforts at standard setting must have robust mechanisms for enforcement and the benefits from open consultative process. Fifth, environment must be protected. To prevent the environment destruction, governments should establish areas in which mineral exploration and mines development is unlawful. Once prospectors discover reserves, companies and governments are subject to strong incentives to develop them. Once the mine is developed, environmental protection is typically weak and even much weaker where corruption is involved. We need to protect those who are raising their voices, journalists, activists, and human rights defenders, to call out corruption, human rights abuses, and devastating environment and social impact. And lastly, we need to take a whole supply chain approach from investors through to consumers. We need to be calling on mining companies to do better. That means companies further down the supply chain of the electric vehicle, for example, and battery manufacturing should need to step up and also step in when their suppliers fall short of these standards. Again, mandatory due diligence legislation that compels these companies to check their supply chains for abuse, and essential step in the change is needed. To conclude, we need to think about measures to ensure good governance, protect the environment, and respect human rights as red lines and not red tapes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Roland. You are so right to highlight the central importance of good governance, and what you mentioned, the adoption of a life cycle approach to mining will be the key to avoiding the pitfalls of the past. And as you mentioned, government has a key role to play in mitigating the environmental impact from mining and safeguarding local communities. And I also thought it was interesting that you pointed to the multilateral or multinational stakeholders as well, and their responsibilities. But moving to the Minister Kalambaye, as we've heard, the Democratic Republic of Congo has the world's largest cobalt reserves, and yet it faces significant human rights and environmental challenges in extracting this and other green transition materials. What measures has the DRC taken to protect its people from the adverse impacts of mineral extraction on public health and the environment, particularly in artisanal mining? And if you could, because we're running short of time, if you could do this in less than 3 minutes, I would be ever so grateful. Thank you.
Oui, bon, d'emblée, je vous dirais que l'État congolais poursuit ses efforts d'amélioration de la gouvernance de ses ressources minières avec à la fois le but de mettre en place les meilleures conditions de vie pour ces populations ainsi que des pratiques respectueuses des droits humains et de l'environnement. Je crois en 2018, nous avions modifié le code minier et nous avons intégré le ESG, l'environnement, le social de la population ainsi que la bonne gouvernance. Et actuellement, en République démocratique du Congo, pour devenir titulaire d'un droit minier, vous devez en amont avoir fait les études d'impact environnemental, avoir présenté un plan social et environnemental. Et puis, qu'est-ce que je dirais d'autre? Nous avons mis des services en place à la direction de protection de l'environnement. Nous avons l'Agence congolaise de l'environnement. Nous avons les services d'assistance et d'encadrement de l'exploitation minière artisanale et à petite échelle. Et là, au niveau du pays, nous avons plusieurs défis et nous sommes en train de continuer à faire le travail sur le terrain. Nous validons le cadre plutôt normatif sur le cobalt d'exploitation artisanale, donc par rapport à la traçabilité, à la transparence. Nous avons l'entreprise générale du cobalt qui est déjà opérationnelle aujourd'hui. Nous avons aussi le travail qui est en train d'être fait sur le terrain, la viabilisation des zones d'exploitation artisanale. Et nous avons un service géologique national du Congo qui est en train de faire un travail de terrain pour pouvoir examiner et identifier des zones d'exploitation où on ne peut pas aller au-delà de 30 mètres. Nous faisons un travail et à chaque fois qu'il y a violation de la protection de l'environnement, nous sanctionnons les entreprises minières. J'ai suivi vraiment avec une particulière attention mon prédécesseur lorsqu'il a expliqué comment nous devons, dès le départ, avant de céder, de donner un droit minier, que nous devons être vraiment regardants pour savoir si toutes les mesures ont été mises en place pour que l'environnement soit protégé. Voilà un peu de mots. Je crois que j'ai fait moins de 3 minutes. Merci.
I think you did fabulously on time, and that's why I'm going to ask you one follow-up question, because the Congo Basin is home to the world's second largest tropical forest, which is a vital global carbon sink. It's a biodiversity hotspot and a source of livelihood for millions. How is it? Is green mineral extraction, how is that contributing to deforestation and biodiversity loss? And what is the DRC doing to prevent this from happening in 2 minutes?
Oui, au fait, moi, je pourrais même dire que tout ce que l'homme fait impacte l'environnement. Je l'ai dit tout à l'heure, nous avons intégré dans le code minier la protection de l'environnement. Lorsqu'une entreprise aujourd'hui vient en République démocratique du Congo pour exploiter les minéraux critiques, il y a des déforestations, bien sûr. Il y a un impact environnemental, mais nous avons résolu en mettant un fonds que doivent mettre à la disposition de la République démocratique du Congo. Donc, les entreprises minières qui se mettent en place pour exploiter, ils mettent un fonds qui est gagé à la Banque centrale. Lorsqu'ils sont en fin de carrière minière, nous prenons ces fonds-là pour réparer tout ce qu'il y a eu comme dégâts environnementaux. Je pourrais même donner l'exemple de l'entreprise Kibali, qui, pour mettre en place son industrie d'or, a eu à impacter la forêt équatoriale. Mais en ce moment, ils ont réparé par rapport à la biodiversité, ils ont aujourd'hui mis à la disposition de la République démocratique du Congo les hippopotames qui représentent quand même une richesse pour la République démocratique du Congo. Ils ont eu à planter autant d'arbres pour pouvoir donner la possibilité de recréer d'autres forêts en République démocratique du Congo. Et nous avons, je crois que vous devez le savoir, je ne voudrais pas entrer trop en profondeur par rapport à la protection de l'environnement, parce que nous avons un ministère qui est chargé de la protection de l'environnement, où nous avons aujourd'hui, le Congo est vendeur du crédit carbone. Donc, tout est mis en place pour que, à la fois, nous exploitons des minéraux critiques, à la fois, nous protégeons l'environnement. Donc, toutes les mesures ont été prises en compte. Je crois avoir répondu à votre préoccupation.
Yes, very well. Thank you. Thank you, Minister, Your Excellency. And now I want to ask the ministers and Permanent Secretary one final question. At the outset of this meeting, we noted the importance of international partnerships to accelerate sustainable investment in African critical minerals. And as was mentioned, the first IEA Critical Minerals and Clean Energy Summit will take place next week. There was actually a question from the chat where the question came: what would it take for Africa to be in the driving seat, and why the DRC and Namibia appear not to be represented at the IEA summit next week? But the question that I wanted to ask, and I'll tag this one along, what are the key messages that you have for participating mineral importing economies that need your resources to advance their net zero transformation? What would you say to these economies at that IEA conference? If I start with Namibia, then move over to Zambia, and then to the Congo, and if you can give us the main messages in 2 minutes or less, that would be fabulous. Starting with Namibia, Minister Shilunga.
Thank you very much for the last question. But perhaps before I respond to the question, I'm actually hearing about the summit for the first time just now. And I can't remember us having received such an invitation. Perhaps it's something that you or the organizers can have a look at after the meeting. Coming to the question, on partnership, especially on those participating mineral importing economies that are in need of our resources, I would say this is a critical moment for us as developing countries to engage in partnership with resource-rich countries. And if this partnership are only to be implemented with transparency and fairness, they will really play an important role in African countries to achieve our respective national, regional, and continental development agenda, while also at the same time, international partners ensure supply to their respective countries and markets. What I would also like to say or inform to our partners and the future partners, I want to say all the policies that we are looking forward to or that we are developing as African countries with regard to critical minerals. We are doing all that to create the Africa we want as per Agenda 2063. I hope it is a well-known agenda from the AU level. We would really like to have the Africa we want. Africa for Africans, Africa working together, Africa interacting with itself, Africa integration, Africa that will be able to deliver the future of our generations to come. Finally, the other message that I would like to say is that Namibia has much to offer. This is now to the investors and to the partners or the future partners. We are a country that is very stable politically. We have a rule of law. There is also protection for investors because, for example, in the mineral sector, we have the act that secures the tenure, and we have well-developed infrastructure. You might also have heard that Namibia's roads are considered or are found to be the best in the whole of Africa. We have the efficient communication technologies and also sound financial institutions. And we have a small population, but we have so much to offer. So many hidden gems are waiting you when it comes to minerals or natural resources. We also have got a beautiful scenery, landscape, and the beautiful people of Namibia. Please, we are open for business, and we are looking forward to the future partnership. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. And when you speak of that Namibia has a small population, being from Iceland myself, where we are 380,000, I think Namibia is a superpower with a lot of with a large population.
Oh, ours is large then.
Thank you again. Moving now to Zambia, Permanent Secretary Kapeta. What are your key messages to the participating importing economies in 2 minutes, please?
Thank you very much. I think as I make my statement, let me just recap on the earlier comments that have been made by the Honorable Minister from Namibia. Most of the issues she raises, we can as well take them as our own. One key issue I wanted to mention, capping up from Cyrus, is the need to improve governance in the mining sector. What we have done in Zambia is that for a long time, we have, as a ministry, we have been involved in policy as well as regulation. Now we have separated policy and regulation with the creation of the Minerals Regulation Commission that will be totally responsible for the regulation of the mining industry, and the Minister of Mines will have the responsibility for policy formulation and guidance. Now, the key message that I have from Zambia is to indicate to the critical minerals importing countries that Zambia has a presence of critical minerals, some of which the country is already mining to this point. In this matter, I've referenced to minerals such as copper. We're talking about nickel. Right now, I think we have the largest nickel mine in Africa. We talk about manganese. We have some of the largest deposits. We have cobalt, and we have other minerals that we are currently producing. Therefore, Zambia is open for sustainable investment in the exploration and mining of these minerals. However, while we need this, we are, as much as we are in a hurry to exploit the resource, Zambia will not do so at the expense of future generations, hence sustainable investments. In this regard, investors exploiting critical minerals have to recognize the need, must be aware of the potential risks that may arise due to increased demand and extraction of these minerals, and must be ready to ensure that the risks are avoided or minimized at all costs. Secondly, let me use this platform to inform investors that Zambia has declared all minerals, almost all minerals, critical minerals, as strategic, which are essential for Zambia's economic transformation. This entails that as government, we shall take a stake and we shall be involved in literally all assets, greenfield assets, not brownfields, but in greenfield assets that will be exploiting critical minerals in the country. This is the guarantee that critical minerals do not become a case, as was the case in the past, but be the ones that spur economic growth and development of the African continent in general and Zambia in particular. In this particular area, as government gets involved in the critical minerals, we have plans to develop a sovereign wealth fund so that when the opportunities for critical minerals are gone, we shall remain with something that the future generations can use for reinvestment in the country. Government is therefore looking for credible partners to exploit these minerals in partnership with government and a mutually beneficial agreement for both parties. Key to this will be in-country value addition to these minerals as government is thinking that we need to be forward-looking in everything that we do, and therefore value addition is the way to go in order to transform the country and create meaningful jobs and transform the country, and through that reduce poverty and improve the quality of life of Zambians. So as the Zambian government, we expect mutual trust, transparency between government and investors in the exploitation of critical minerals in Zambia. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Permanent Secretary. Not at the expense of future generation. I think that is a beautiful quote from beautiful message from this discussion, and responsibility and transparency. To close this, we will now turn to the DRC, and you have been doing so very well on time that 2 minutes to bring this home from you, Minister.
Bon, je vais vous faire gagner un temps, je ne ferai même pas 1 minute. Nous sommes tous conscients du moment critique que traverse la planète avec la problématique contemporaine du réchauffement climatique et de ses conséquences réelles sur notre vie ou que nous vivons sur cette planète. La République démocratique du Congo, avec ses nombreuses ressources en minerais verts, est désireuse de travailler avec tous les investisseurs dans les domaines de l'exploration, de l'extraction et de la transformation, mais que cela se fasse localement et dans le respect du Code des règlements miniers de la République démocratique du Congo. Et nous ne voudrons pas être la chasse gardée d'un quelconque investisseur. Mieux encore, la République démocratique du Congo souhaite accueillir tout investisseur ou partenaire disposé à s'inscrire dans la vision d'une exploitation sincère, gagnant-gagnant et transparente, dans l'intérêt de tous. Voilà le souhait et le mot de la République démocratique du Congo. Je vous souhaite à vous tous une bonne soirée.
Thank you very much, Minister, and to all of you, ministers and other panelists who have shared your valuable insights and perspectives with us here today. We're almost to the end of this event, and we are a little bit over time, but we have a couple of more minutes to conclude. And at the COP last year, COP 27, the OECD Development Centre and the African Development Bank agreed, we've been talking about partnership here, agreed to join forces and foster partnerships that can deliver solutions for the just green transition in Africa. And this panel discussion is one important step in that journey. So I'm very happy that Vanessa Usi, the acting director of the African Natural Resources Management and Investment Center of the African Development Bank, she is here with us and for the closing segment. And Vanessa, you've been listening in. What are your key takeaways from today's discussion?
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Raga. So good afternoon to the excellencies, speakers, participants from the African Development Bank Group. It's an honor for me to be here with you today. And I really enjoyed the discussions because they're very practical. And it was good to hear the insights from the country. So I think I have 6 points, which are, I would say, are key takeaways. So the first one is a need for more exploration finance, that we need to invest more in exploration. Although we have these green mineral reserves, they're just potentials. To turn a potential into an asset, you need to have knowledge of the value of that asset. And that means we need to invest in actually identifying these green minerals or transition minerals or critical. I mean, we have so many permutations of what they're called. But the central theme is that they're really important to energy transition and that we need to invest more as a continent in regional cooperation to find them. Second is about how the African Continental Free Trade Area is a very good mechanism to facilitate regional cooperation on green mineral development. Why is it important? Because we talk about economies of scale. If you do something alone, you may do it well, but at what cost? So if African countries come together, there are so many agglomeration benefits. If you look at hard infrastructure, whether it's roads, railways, energy, or skills, skilled labor, building centers of excellence, like what the DRC has done, and then even down to finance, so that it's really more efficient to collaborate. I think another important point was moving beyond the commodity trap. You know, that Africa has had decades of volatile and weak growth, high unemployment, social inequality. How can we move beyond this very pessimistic narrative? So it requires a fresh thinking on what is a partnership. I like the whole idea of win-win. It sounds very aspirational, but to get there, we need to know what we want. So this is why the AFDB has collaborated with the African Union Commission to develop what we call an African green mineral strategy. I don't know if it was discussed, mentioned at all today. And the vision is to have an Africa whereby we can create local value. We have regional industrial hubs, either manufacturing or processing materials from our own green minerals. And we've heard that the DRC is highly competitive in producing battery precursors. So this is why we want to now have a continental vision, building on the African mining vision, to take forward ambitions to become really self-sufficient. I think another important point, which I found very interesting, is on governance, what Silas was talking about: due diligence, inclusion, environmental and social issues. If you look at artisanal and small-scale mining, it's actually the dominant way of extracting these same green minerals. And the whole rhetoric on leaving no one behind, we shouldn't leave the artisanal miners behind. So we need to find a way in which value is extended beyond economic rents to actually having jobs being created in communities living around mining sites and seeing benefits from investments in education, healthcare, and other social amenities. One other thing is on the private sector, they need to scale private finance. These are very cost-intensive investments when you say building an industry and a regional hub of processing, whether it's for battery precursors or even for electric vehicles, that we need to have the private sector. And the whole idea of partnerships, working for public-private multilateral institutions to de-risk the investment space and bring in more investors. So overall, I think this is a very good conversation. It's very practical. What we're doing in the bank now is looking at natural capital as an asset. And these green minerals really bring the message home of the need for Africa to have more value for these assets. And this is through valuation and accounting and other methods. But what we say is that it's a very high dependence on nature without local value addition. And this we understand as being nature reliant. But to become nature resilient, you need to localize value. And so the vision of the African Green Mineral Strategy is to say, how can we make Africa nature resilient and not just nature reliant and exporting all the value to, as you call them, energy importing countries. So we want to make Africa's green minerals work for Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vanessa, for these important takeaways. And I have to say that I agree with all of your reflections. Just my main takeaway from this discussion, and again, many thanks to all of the participants. But I think first and foremost that it's clear from this discussion that green transition minerals can be a game changer in Africa. They're key ingredients for countries seeking to develop climate resilient, sustainable pathways and to enhance energy security, which is also another topic of discussion we can take at another time. But as has been repeatedly said here, for this to happen, the African continent needs to be seen not just as a source of mineral supply, but as a partner for shared prosperity. And there must be a shared understanding that we all countries depend on each other. And the transition minerals and the global green transition must both drive sustainable development in Africa, as well as contribute to net zero in the global north, because these go hand in hand. So importing and producing countries, they must work together to ensure that the benefits from green minerals are distributed fairly within and across countries and generations, as has been mentioned here repeatedly today, and to redress social and environmental injustices. And I think also this calls for a different approach to engaging with Africa. There must be a global trading system that promotes a fair sharing of the benefits and of the risks of mining, and to unlock the benefits. International partners can support countries in designing robust policies, quality infrastructure, skills, as Vanessa mentioned, more transparent and predictable regulatory framework, as we've been discussing, the governance, good governance, and robust institutions. And from our side at the OECD Development Centre, we stand ready to support all of these goals by establishing a community of practice to help the Global South capitalize on the opportunities that are afforded by green transition minerals. And what is our core competence here is facilitating peer-to-peer learning. And by doing that, the community will support efforts to implement a life cycle approach to mining development, effective trade cooperation and public-private, regional, that we've discussed a lot, and international collaboration. So we are eager to work with all of you to bring this to life. Finally, just to conclude, I want to thank once again all of the speakers, distinguished speakers who have participated and shared your insights, and also our good partners at the Center for Global Development. I want to thank the AFDB, of course, and also our good colleagues and friends from the IEA who have been both participating and listening throughout. And I think we have well over 100 that have been watching this event today. And of course, we will make the video available after we conclude. So once again, many thanks, and I wish all of you a